Well, everyone knows that the Chinese Communist Party has been buying up our land, a lot of farmland specifically, around the country. Many states, some states have now forbidden them to own farmland, as it should be. A lot of people do not understand that Americans and American business are not allowed to own property in China. We are not allowed to export our many of our goods to China either. The only way that they would allow us to have access to their, billion plus people is if we build in China, and therefore they now have access to all of our technology, all the patent information. Basically, you're giving up the technical. Many companies, of course, are built upon what makes them special, what makes them unique. And once you decide that you're going to operate in China, you basically they are stealing your intellectual property along the way, and that is part of their plan and has been a plan all along.
Welcome. I'm Bill Johnson with American Decency Association, and this is not the first, but we're only done 4 or 5 podcasts. But we're really excited about having my friend Ron Armstrong, who's just down the road from us, really in Newaygo, and so we've been able to have some time together. Ron, I recall that time where we were together for about 3.5 hours in Newaygo over a breakfast, and I think we had really scratched the surface, but it was a wonderful time of fellowship. So anyway, just a brief few words about myself. For those of us for those of you that are not aware of our ministry, we worked on legislation. We passed obscenity legislation. That was what a battle that was. We were very effective in driving Howard Stern off the airwaves nationwide, and then we had great success in terms of driving Abercrombie and Fitch out of the publication, and also then the sending out the making available their pornographic catalog. So anyway, that was a lot of my history, and a little be known to me at that time. Ron, you were already doing major work as the mayor of Newaygo, and I could see over the years, wow, something's going on in Newaygo, and then I found out about this Ron Armstrong, and he was working on this new ministry outlet of Stand Up Michigan. And so at this point, just give a quick word about as difficult as that is, but say a little bit about that. We'll come back more fully to it, Ron, if you would, please.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, God gives us gifts and talents, and the question always is will we use them or how will we use them? And I think that it's a question I ask myself. Certainly, we can sometimes get bogged down into responsibilities, volunteering, whatever, to where all of a sudden you're not being used where God really wants you to be used, though you might be using those same gifts and talents. And so, my short bio is I finished high school over in this side of the state. I was originally from Port Huron area, and decided that I was going to have my business here in Newaygo. I started it next year will be 40 years since I opened Armstrong Display Concepts, which is a really a messaging marketing company. It's for face-to-face selling, all the little tools that you typically use either in recruiting or promoting yourself, the table covers, your pull-up banner stands, your little tabletop displays. So we really work with a lot of large sales forces, nonprofits. We've done a lot with nonprofit organizations, either in raising money or creating awareness. And so that's really kind of been my space. Well, long story short, my kids had 5 kids, raising them in a single school system, which was a goal that I had set. I had been at 9 schools after the 4th grade and determined that I was going to raise my kids in a stable environment in a single community. Newaygo was the community we decided to do that. And it was very rewarding through that process. I did things like coach baseball, ran the Rocket football program, did the typical things you do, leading singing in our church and leading adult Sunday school teaching. And so long as the kids get a little older, we realized we hadn't passed a bond issue in our city here since 1964. We were operating out of portables. We were growing by about 30% that decade in our community, and I was approached about helping run a school bond issue, mainly because I wasn't part of the school system, but I had that marketing, messaging, parental kind of leadership role. So I took that on, and over a period of a year, we identified the problems, got with people, and we got the bond issue passed. that led to a group of business owners coming and asking me if I'd be willing to run for mayor. We had had some embezzlement that had happened with a city manager here in the past. He was no longer a city manager, but they wanted some fresh kind of fresh view of what economic development and people running the city might look like. And I questioned it, but I decided I needed to be willing to serve. I was not a part. I hadn't attended a lot of city council meetings, but when I did go, I said, "Look, we are going to look to the future in this community." In other words, you can't want things to stay the same after you've come into a community. Okay, now we're going to close the door behind us. We have to look at who lives here now, look at revitalizing a downtown that's a beautiful historic downtown that sits on a river, highway runs through it, and yet it was boarded up and full of secondhand stores, real estate. It was nothing retail, nothing inviting. And of course, everything in that stage of the 80s, 90s had moved to strip malls. Downtowns were dying all over the country. And we decided to search out grants. And through this process, of course, it
Ron,
became a political process.
excuse me for just, what year was that, Ron?
That would have been in the late 1990s, 99 and 2000. And I was mayor from 2000 to 2010. One term, which was going to be maybe 2 terms, turned into 5 terms, as they sometimes always do, because we always had the next project of revitalizing not only a downtown, but creating an environment in which, as I said with our kids, they all wanted to get out of school and then they were leaving the community. You so often hear that in small towns. I'm leaving, I'm going to get out of here, whatever. And I said, if we want to create an environment, we want to create one where our kids want to come back, where they want to maybe raise a family and send their kids to school here and have job opportunity here. And in order for that to happen, we have to be able to have the jobs available, to have the forward thinking, and make it a community people want to live in. And so that's really where I spent the 10 years. We attracted state and local grants. We attracted federal grants, MISHDA grants to put apartments above the retail environment. We had, of course, the highway coming back through town. So we had MDOT. It pretty much was a whole conglomeration, but we really looked at it as if everybody put their part in, we could get the community we wanted. And of course, the final part of all of that is private investment. And we encouraged people to invest in themselves and invest in their community. And we ended up with about $30 million in private investment that happened in the downtown that leveraged all the other things that we got done. And so if you happen to come through Newaygo County, you'll notice that this is a beautiful city that sits again on a hill in the middle of a beautiful north country of Grand Rapids. And I'm proud of it. And now we've got some kids that have chosen to raise their families here as well, Bill.
Ron, that's a beautiful overview, and being just residing from just 10 minutes away, and having experienced Newaygo moving into Fremont in '78. Newaygo always was a downtrodden community, and so your description of it is absolutely accurate, and it's a beautiful, wonderful, inviting town, and certainly through all that time, and through your commercial business as well, you learned, and I think you obviously had some great gifts from God in terms of leadership and fire in your belly as well. And so now, Ron, I want to be able to just briefly at this point, and maybe even come back to this, but talk about how you emerged into Stand Up Michigan in recent years.
So in 2020, I think all of us had something, we experienced something that we never anticipated experiencing in our life. And that was, the COVID scare, which became tyranny. The COVID, as I said, in a matter of 2 weeks to so-called bend the curve, to understand what we were dealing with, to understand how we should move forward in operating as a family, as businesses. I think it was pretty well understood that especially in Michigan, along with say Illinois, California, many states, it became a control mechanism. It was a test, if you will, of whether or not we as individuals and certainly as business owners would conform and consent to unconstitutional requests regarding our own personal lives, the use of our own property, the where we could go and how far we could travel, and who we could go with and who we could be with for our own holidays. This was as close to something you would see in communist China anywhere else in the world where they literally were controlling each and every aspect of your life. And literally in a matter of months, we recognized whether it was government who was determining. We weren't the consent of the governed any longer. We had a governor like Whitmer who was saying, I don't need the legislators' approval. I'm going to operate off a 1945 law, which has no limits. I'll issue 300 executive orders, literally micromanaging everything from whether we could go to church or not, whether we could visit our second home, where we could shop for certain things. And though the churches were going to be closed, the liquor stores and the abortion clinics were all open. Certain things were, of course, considered essential. And I know I'm visiting something that certainly, probably, and hopefully creates a level of anger back in you, and maybe touches on the fear that you experienced because we were being lied to by the medical community. We were being dictated to by, again, tyrannical governors, and I think globalist powers who were looking to undermine the individual and constitutional rights that, by the way, don't go away during emergencies. And these emergency orders that were declared on us as individuals, and again, as I said, in business owners, again became, you were essential or non-essential. They would determine that ultimately on their own, and they would incentivize those that went along. So the hospital systems, the school systems, the major manufacturers like automotive companies, they all were incentivized with our own tax dollars to let them continue to operate and to profit from a hyped up virus. And what it really did in that case was put us in a very difficult financial situation, as well as a question spiritually as what would we do. And what I would say, Bill, to that, and how Stand Up Michigan was formed, is we wanted to provide people. It was started out as a Facebook group. And that was to communicate, or to let people communicate with each other in regard to challenges that they were experiencing in their own lives. So we had single mothers who waited tables, and all of a sudden they didn't have a job. We had people who were educating or told they had to educate their kids from home who had never done anything like that before. We had people who had lost their jobs, who couldn't get unemployment and didn't know where to get it. They couldn't literally get through the system, if you will. They couldn't afford food. We had churches that were closed, and pastors who were more than willing to stay closed for fearful of what would happen. I believe to their, to their tithing, or they literally went along to get along, if you will. And I looked at that as a gigantic opportunity that I believe the faith-based community had to fill the void, if you will, to operate under certainly a faith, but also we knew what we needed to do as far as of staying home if you're sick. I mean, these are things that were common sense in the past, but churches should have been open to those that either had the virus and had recovered, or those that weren't fearful of it. We needed to continue with the messaging, and we should have gone, of course, mobile and Zoom like to the homes of the people, but we should have continued to do that. We should have opened up our churches during the week to educate the children whose parents did have those jobs that were considered essential, and we could have been teaching them what faith was all about. We could have been, we literally were the solution. And I say we failed the test. And Stand Up Michigan was formed originally to give a voice to the people. And as we said, we had three pillars, which was to care for people where they are. That's the first one, wherever they are in their walk, wherever they were, and whatever their challenges were. To care, and then to inform them. We had to separate what they were hearing from legacy media, from the news media, from their own doctors in a lot of cases, and reduce the level of fear, and to instill with them that we were still living in a constitutional republic and had the abilities to move forward. And then finally, to activate the people in their own community to be the solution that they knew we needed at the time and forevermore. And so that was the plan. That was the launch in 2020 into 2021. And from there, we have expanded into more county chapters, and again, focusing on local governance and to make sure we don't forget what happened and never allow it to happen again.
On as someone who had, been laboring in the 80s and the 90s and early 2000, particularly on the areas that I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that we were experiencing in those years was great lethargy. It was, through the activism of chapters of the AFA all across the country. I was able to compare notes with a lot of the other state directors as well, and there'd be new chapters that would start within a couple of years. They would falter and fall apart. And so it also, from the standpoint of financial support or even community support, recognizing the fact that fighting pornography obscenity isn't the most popular thing in the pub for the public to do. Many people are addicted to pornography, and so they kind of shy away from you. But nonetheless, I think that where I'm leading with this is that I have seen over these recent years, Ron, yeah, all across the country, but in our state, even over on the east side of the state, where we hardly saw anybody that was concerned about righteousness or holiness or decency or engagement, politically from the standpoint of passing that obscenity legislation. I'm not saying we felt like we were fighting alone, but I have seen such a strong uprising all across this state. And even particularly over on the eastern side with Michigan Fair Election, for example, all kinds of volunteers with great abilities stepping in, standing up like you've been doing, and I'm sure you've seen that as well. And it doesn't seem to be subsiding even after the election of Donald Trump. What is your take on what I've been stating here?
Well, again, the third pillar that we had was to activate. I think that is the problem we've had is that people, Christians specifically, faith-based people, have traditionally been raising their families, going to church. Maybe they're doing a little coaching or a little bit of teaching in Sunday school, whatever it might be. But when it comes to citizenship or serving in government, most of them have shied away. Really, I think it was a lie that was told to us, or that is kind of an unspoken rule. The whole separation of church and state is a lie. It always was the case that the faith based leaders also helped lead in their communities. They were the leaders, if you will. And I think that what we've allowed to happen is we've allowed not only globalists, but those really those ungodly people, the left, if you will, in a lot of cases, especially today, that have filled the void. They are running our school systems. They are in our school boards. They are your city councils. They are your county commissions. Pretty much, they are the people. They. It doesn't matter whether they run as a Republican or a Democrat. Remember, all that is a letter. All that is an identifier. We associate Republicans with conservatism, but it doesn't mean they're conservative any more than a old what we call a blue dog Democrat or someone working for the you know the average American, the average worker. That's no longer what the Democratic Party is either. It is now controlled and run by a leftist group. It's run by globalists. It is run really to make people believe that they're doing things for the people, when in actuality they want to keep you dumb, they want to keep you stupid, they want to keep you naive, and they want to continue to supply the handouts as best they can to just keep you voting them into power and keep you down. Really, it's not that opportunity. And on the right side, I think what's happened in 2020 is I think it started when people were having and forced to help educate their children. They began to recognize for the first time, many parents, what was actually in the curriculum and what wasn't. They recognized what was being taught to our kids and what wasn't. They realized what their children were absorbing. And even when it came to testing, they realized this is not what we represent. This is not the country that my family, my grandparents taught me. The sense of personal responsibility, the place for faith-based and community leadership and involvement had been replaced by climate change and really an anti-God kind of movement. And so I think that along with, of course, the parental rights and choice over what we do, masking our 2-year-olds, forcing vaccinations on our kids, canceling kids that were in college. I think the parental right movement really rose up out of this. We certainly saw it in Virginia and other states that were very purple, kind of like Michigan. And I think that that it has really brought out, I think, a new group of leaders that are the next generation, if you will. I kind of came out of the Reagan Revolution, a time after the 70s, where we had experienced Jimmy Carter and 21.5% interest on my auto loan, 13.5% mortgages on your homes, a weak America, and that's when that left, and we were replaced with a Reagan view of the world, and a thousand shining lights, and all the things that were there. The hope and America's best is yet to come. But don't forget where our founding was. Don't forget God in government. All of those things really inspired me, and it helped me become, as a business owner, as a parent, what I knew we needed to preserve and how delicate that all was. That's now a generation ago, is it not? 40 years ago, when the Reagan Revolution happened. And I believe what we're witnessing today, Bill, is a new generation, the Gen Zers that everyone thought were now indoctrinated over a decade, or now really this entire two generations, if you want to call it, have been indoctrinated into being anti-God and being more worried about the planet than we are worried about what we do here on this earth. And I believe that they've overplayed their hand, as evil always does. I believe Satan has overplayed his hand. He isn't hiding who they are anymore at all, because they don't need to when it comes to legacy media. But I do believe it is an awakening. It's an opportunity. The reelection of Donald Trump has opened the door to give us a what I believe is one last chance to be that beacon of light, which America's the last stand. This is it. If we don't survive, if we don't push back, if we don't crush this globalist movement in our country, and we don't do it in this next 4 years and beyond, then I believe that our best days will be behind us and our republic will fall.
Very well said, Ron. And yet, at the same time, and I'm very curious what your thoughts are in this regard. So, we do hear from the standpoint of the Republican Party, particularly in the state of Michigan, but even locally, there's still great struggles that's taking place in terms of leadership and local leadership, statewide leadership, and a lot of so-called rhinos yet exist, and I think that would be said to be true in Newaygo County as well. And yet, Ron, at the same time, we are encouraged by our most recent state rep, Joe Fox, who is a strong voice for Christ in whatever he does, and John Llewellyn, as he is the chairman of the Newaygo County Republican Party. I believe these individuals are desiring for unity within the party, and within the local area as well. But the fight is great there, and unity is important. But conservatism and the faith, Christianity, is really, I believe, is what needs to be the unifier. And so, tell it, you have probably a lot more awareness than I do of whether it's a state struggle or the local struggle in those regards that I just got through articulating.
Well, it's a national struggle. It's everywhere, and remember, the majority of the states in this country are what we call red states. Some states have not a single county, not a single county that is led by Democrats, which means that then why is it that a place like Oklahoma or Arkansas or Alabama or Mississippi, why is it that they're not passing legislation? Why are they not codifying much of what Trump is doing? And it's because they're not conservative. See, we'll give a perfect example. In Michigan, we have approximately 70 counties that voted for President Trump out of 83. So we are anywhere between 65 and as much as 70%. And by the way, Newaygo County tipped the 70% level of voting for Trump. That means 7 out of every 10 people that voted are conservative or voted for freedom and liberty and not for tyranny and not for this globalist thing. But you would think then that would mean that 70% of our leadership in these positions we discussed earlier are run by conservative, faith-minded people that are providing a vision for the future, and they're not. And this is the reason, because Newaygo County and many of the communities, the majority of the communities in Michigan and around the country, the primary is the election. And so whoever wins the primary on the Republican side is going to prevail in November. It isn't a question, because Democrats just don't win on the ballot. So what you find is, and the left understands this, So if you want to serve on the county commission, if you want to serve in a certain capacity, you must run as a Republican or under the Republican banner to get elected, because otherwise you can take all the vote you want on the Democratic side, but you will never be elected. For instance, they always talk about Democrats crossing over and voting in the primary. Of course they do, because if they want to vote for the sheriff, if they want to vote for the county commissioner, if they want to vote for those areas that actually have multiple people on the ballot, they must vote in the Republican primary or they have no one to vote for. There's no one running on the Democratic side. And if they are running on the Democratic side, they will not be elected in November. And so what you find is people are simply running to get elected. They're not running to be a part of a party. So we call them rhinos, but we've got to. I always use the example of Martin Luther King when he said, "Don't judge a person by the color of their skin, but again by the character of the man." Right? Well, we need to do the same when it comes to don't judge an individual by their political party. Judge them by the character of the individual. Who are they? What do they stand for? What organizations are they a part of? What are their intentions if elected? And then decide who to vote for. And the problem we have on our side, on the political side, is that our state parties, our county Republican parties, and our state GOP, as well as the RNC, do not get involved in primaries. They don't recruit people. They don't promote people. They don't support people, the right people. And so, therefore, they just tell you to vote Republican come November, and they usually don't even get involved until the summer of the election every 2 years on a cycle. And the left doesn't operate under that. The left operates under a relational organizing all the time under micro issues, and they identify, promote, recruit, train, and retain the people that they want to have in those positions. But it isn't up to the Republican Party in our county. It isn't up to our GOP or the RNC. It is up to the people that live in each community. After all, that's really what America was meant to be, is a group of people in a community who are going to supply the needs and the leadership from within to solve the problems that exist in our own communities, because every community has a different set of challenges and problems. And so we really need to. And the answer right now, because the window has been opened, the executive orders of President Trump have given us the ability, the courage, and the platform for us to be able to replace, train, recruit, and potentially retain or to defeat the people who stand for the principles in which we stand for and the community is. So those 7 out of 10 people that voted in Newaygo County for Trump, those 7 out of 10 should be choosing the leadership in all positions that exist in Newaygo County. And that is the same in each and every county, because if you get 7 out of 10, you win every election. And that's where we need to be. So the future right now is in 25, not when we get to the next cycle and we're just told to get out and vote. It needs to be beginning that organizational structure, the communication within your churches and your community leaders to create the leaders for tomorrow.
It also is very well said, and that is one of the great challenges that we face, and it's also convicting even to myself. But perhaps we can come back and revisit this very subject because that is deep and wide, and I know also that you're working in that regard. And I'd like to have you be able to share with me about that at some point that's convenient for you. But I want to, because we are trying to keep this within an hour as much as I don't want to. But I know that from the standpoint of the listener, we should try to keep to that. But I wanted to now tilt over to talking about Gotion, which is common to is where many people across the country, and certainly in Newaygo County and beyond, our Mecosta County and adjoining counties have great awareness of this. And I know that this has also been a place where you have stood strong, very strongly. And I would also like to say that one of the things that I think is so wonderful in terms of how God has led you and built you and strengthened you and put you into very powerful alignments, even with the Committee on Present Danger China with Frank Gaffney. And often you are seated with some of the 5 or 6 people that are strongest in relationship to understanding the times in order to know what to do. And you are also one of those spokespersons. So you are an eminent voice for speaking about the Goshen issue. So if you would, Ron, give us some background into that talk about the struggles and then where we're at, because I think there are some people that think the battle is over there, and some people don't think it is at all. But there might also be some viewers that say Gotion, they don't even know what that's talking about. So take it from there, please.
Well, everyone knows that the Chinese Communist Party has been buying up our land, a lot of farmland specifically, around the country. Many states, some states have now forbidden them to own farmland, as it should be. A lot of people do not understand that Americans and American business are not allowed to own property in China. We are not allowed to export our many of our goods to China either. The only way that they would allow us to have access to their, billions plus people is if we build in China, and therefore they now have access to all of our technology, all the patent information. Basically, you're giving up the technical. Many companies, of course, are built upon what makes them special, what makes them unique. And once you decide that you're going to operate in China, they are stealing your intellectual property along the way. And that is part of their plan and has been a plan all along. But getting access, of course, to their people have made, the big automotive makers and many others have built there. We also, again, get access to their cheap labor, their child labor. Many of the things that we are against here in America wouldn't think of. We are buying those products that are produced by 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds who are slave labor working for nothing in filthy factories in China. And then they are exporting those goods so that we can save some money over here in America. Well, China decided, look, this isn't enough. We've got to begin to export and control certain aspects of around the world. And so they did many things. And one of those was buying the rights to many of the minerals that are necessary in order to produce batteries, this electric battery plant, and as we call it, mandates that have been happening around the world. The climate change agenda, many of these are not only Chinese manufactured because of cost associated, but also it is required to have many of the raw materials, which China now owns 80% of has the rights to excavating and then creating and using 80% of these materials. And so when they, with the help of, and I should say, with the blessing of the left, governors like Newsom and the governor of Illinois and California have decided that we are going to force us to get away from gas-powered engines. We're going to force you into buying electric vehicles, like it or not. We're going to move by 2030. You've heard of the 2030 agenda and the 2050, as Gretchen Whitmer mentioned in Michigan, to have us not only be 50% operational vehicles. And so Gotion decided that we're going to look for rural areas. We're going to buy up that property, and we're going to build these Gotion plant in Mecosta County, Michigan. It happens to be an area which is within 100 miles of one of the most important National Guard areas here in Michigan. It also is where there is a university called Ferris State University, whose president was originally with Grand Rapids Community College. This guy is a leftist, and he moved to Ferris and is all in favor of not only housing Chinese nationalists who were going to work in this factory, but basically undermining our big three automotive. And as you know, we have incentivized many of the big three and other automotive type companies through federal subsidies, state subsidies, and now we're talking about taxpayer subsidies for people to not only be able to build the plants, and to be able to afford the vehicles. $5,000, you buy an electric car, but guess who pays for that? All of the small business, all the taxpayers are subsidizing that. But we all know the infrastructure doesn't exist. And so when they literally moved in and they met with and worked with, under these non-disclosure agreements, the leadership of a township called Green Township in Mecosta County, they incentivized these individuals. I believe many of them were financially going to benefit from allowing or approving these. And then there were others that simply were ignorant to the process and were looking at it purely from an example of, we're going to create 1,000 jobs in Mecosta County, and therefore that has to be a wonderful thing. They're going to be high-paying jobs, literally it was going to be 38 or $40 an hour. Well, all that turned out to be a lie. It wasn't going to be that many jobs. It wasn't going to be, not to Americans, it wasn't going to be that much money per job. That was an average, if you will. And they were, of course, incentivizing it, not with hundreds of thousands or even millions, but with hundreds of millions and potentially $1 billion in taxpayer subsidies over the next 30 years to build this battery plant to produce batteries that were going to potentially be forced into automotive vehicles in Michigan and around the country. And we knew, because we have dealt with this from the past, that it was less likely that these jobs were going to be created, that their infrastructure didn't exist for these electric cars as fast as they were doing it. But most importantly, they were really taking advantage of the people of that community. And so what happened, and it's goes back to what I'd said before, is we basically, the group and the community rose together, went to their county commission meetings and their township board meetings and said, we do not want this. When the board said, we don't care what our people think, they went out and recalled that board. The entire board, some of which had served for 20 years, were all recalled. And that was the first step. They did the same thing at the county commission level, only that then was required to actually have them all run again in the November election. And lo and behold, all of them were then reelected in Big Rapids Township, in Green Township, and most importantly, they also took over the Mecosta County Commission as a whole, and they basically put a halt to the approval of what was necessary in the next step, which was approvals for zoning, approvals for them, building permits, whatever it is, water rights, all the things that would normally be there, that our governor was stepping in and saying, we don't care what local communities think. This is what we want. We're incentivizing it. Get out of the way, local community, because we're going to overrule the will of the people who live there. That's not how America works. There is no more powerful group of people than a local zoning and local governing body. And to this point, they have pushed back. They have gotten rid of and fired their consultants. They fired their law firm. They fired many of the people that they have, by the way, that they have hired and paid for with your taxpayer money to date. It is still in court. That it is not over yet, believe me. However, there are many, many ways that we can get in their way, and we can make them decide to go somewhere else. And hopefully we can stop this. And we couldn't have done it without not only the people of those communities, Bill, but also people like your congressman, John Molinar, has been a giant spokesperson. He leads the committee against China in Washington. He has been leading the way against Chinese not owning our farmland. And what did they do? They said, oh, if it's for scientific purposes, they can buy it. These were loopholes. We're closing those loopholes now. And he is our own congressman. And so it is about getting the right leadership in place, but it really is about the voice of the people who live there, Bill. And to this point, we've set an example for the rest of Michigan. And certainly we've seen Gotion now being defeated to some extent in Illinois and other places as well.
That is so well stated in just such a brief period of time. Excellent job on that one. So much so. The Governor Whitmer, she supplied, incentivized what, millions of dollars into that campaign, trying to basically shove that down the throats of us in Michigan and those in that county. Talk about that for a moment, if you would.
Well, the original word is $715 million in grants or tax abatements that were being given to them, which literally would have paid for probably at least, well, for what they said they were building, it would have been a third of the overall building and operating with, by the way, then no taxes for 30 years. No taxes. So therefore, they were getting something that you and I don't get. When we expand a business, we don't get anything to hire our people, to train our people, to expand our building, to hire Americans to build for Americans. But yet China was going to get it with your tax dollars. They already handed them $50 million, by the way, to buy up the land at 2 and 3 times the value. It's the reason people sold out. To sign non-disclosure agreements, which means that they can't talk about how much they sold it for. All of these things were done underhanded, and they used systems and policies basically were put in place by this governor. It originally was MEDC. It began being a big hole of money called SOAR, which was another organization they created that was literally providing the tens of millions of dollars. But guess where it was going to? It was going to Democratic strongholds. It was going to Chinese factories. It was going to really non-small business, all big business. They did it with Ford Motor Company, over $2 billion in incentives for their latest battery plant, which was they've already had scaled back a third of. Now we're finding that they've scaled back further on that plant, yet hundreds of millions of dollars has been handed out to through these granting programs, and with no oversight. By the way, no requirement to pay them back, no benchmarks for them to reach to in order to keep that money or to keep those tax abatements in place. And yet that was the whole purpose of the MEDC originally, is you had to create build the amount of facility, you had to create a certain number of jobs, and it had to be over a certain period of time in order to continue to get those. This governor wiped all of that because she wanted to force us into something that the consumer didn't want to buy, that we couldn't afford without subsidies, and more importantly, to basically move us into an area where we would not control our own movement, because it would be decided upon by our government, and hopefully they assumed to be a Kamala Harris organization that was going to California the rest of America and basically ban our ability to travel in the future without government controlling each and every aspect of our life, Bill.
You are such a fountain of information. Ron, tell me about your connection with the Committee on Present Danger China, and the impact that organization has brought to bear. That'd be very helpful. I think there's probably a lot of people have no awareness of the significance of your role in that organization.
Yeah, so President Danger China has been around for a long time, and they basically have been. It is a lot of ex CIA. It is a lot of ex FBI, or people that have been in administrations like Frank Gaffney all the way back to the Reagan administration and prior to that. Some of the people that we connect with go all the way back to the days when Henry Kissinger were moving on to China, the Nixon days. And believe it or not, that was 50 years ago. But those figure, if they were in their 20s, if they're in their 70s, they understand the long-term 100-year plan of communist China to destroy and to control the economics of the world. They are willing to wait. They're willing to indoctrinate. They are willing to take time and to take over. And that is, they have continued to shine the light in that area. And fortunately, areas and organizations like Gotion, like what they've done in many areas of government, and as you know, China has incentivized and infiltrated many of the large corporations. Certainly higher education, the Harvards and the places like that have been incentivized and have been given money by China to basically export, again, our intellectual property, to force us to allow them to take over certain aspects. As you probably have heard through the COVID crisis, they manufacture 90% of our antibiotics. There are many things. You saw the chip crisis we had when literally we couldn't sell a car because we didn't have the chips to make them run. If that doesn't put the fear of God into you, that the fact that we were entrusted much of that to China. And so we have, over the course of this election and this cycle, the COVID crisis, where did Wuhan Lab start? What was really the undermining plan of China? We believe that the ultimate plan in the Wuhan labs was to let and release this virus on the world, but not when it happened. It was going to happen slightly longer, but they were literally using the DNA that was collected on Americans and other white Anglo-Americans around the world, and to basically make sure it was going to be more dangerous to that group of society and not to the Asian groups, so that it wouldn't kill the Asians, but it would kill, or the Chinese, but it would kill a larger portion of America. There is absolutely, and it has been proven now, where this virus came from. Again, did Trump not talk about it, the China virus? We all know where it came from. Fauci was involved, NIH and the National Institute of Health, funded by our own government, which funded research that was done at the Wuhan lab and other places that was weaponizing viruses against the people. This is population control. It is much in many other areas. And the president and of China have continued to look at that and recognize that we have got to have a strong America, that we have got to have the leadership. So that off of that also span two other coalitions. One is the Sovereignty Coalition to get us out of the World Health Organization and not allow global governance to control our healthcare system, to get access to our medical records, get access to our DNA and whatever, and then Save America's Military. I'm a founding member of both those organizations, and Save America's Military was the DIA and the woke generals that have been able to be put into place over 20 and 30 years. They are the leadership. They're not the rank and file. It started at the FBI and the CIA. They have been taken over and infiltrated to where we have weakened us. When you see the Afghanistan withdrawal, when you see much of the things that have happened, you realize we have a weakened military, we have weakened leadership, we are no longer inspiring, we are no longer have peace through strength. Instead, we have peace through appeasement. This is what America has become. It's intentional, anti-Israel, all of the things that you have seen. And they have continued to highlight this with some incredible expert people, both on China and on the leadership that existed or replacing the leadership that existed. And we are seeing that with a Pete Hegseth. We're seeing that with Donald Trump and Akash Patel. We're going to see it continue on. Is it going to take some time? It is, which is the reason that we have to have this Congress again codify many of these executive orders to dismantle what the destruction of America that was set to take place. Trump got in the way in 16. He was not expected to win. It would have been over had he lost then. But I believe that God used his dismantling and his losing in 2020 to wake up America, and rather than just settling back and letting him lose out his term and defeating him again in 2020 and stealing an election, that alone is what actually woke up America. It was not intentional, but it was the result. Legacy media is dead in a lot of ways, and our voice and your voice needs to be heard, but our actions are what are necessary in the communities in which we live.
Ron, I think that one of the areas as we move towards closing that would be really significant to you that I'm sure you already have thought about this or considered this and is a burden for you is that there are those, and I certainly would be in that camp. We are very thankful for obviously the election and the cabinet and so many positives that have come down from that. And yet at the same time, Trump is a godsend in terms of leadership, as you say, spared by the bullet, which awakened many of us all across the country. But the concern is that the change must come from the bottom as well as the top. This administration is going to end, and at the meantime, we need to have a bubbling up from the base. A spiritual revival, I think, is what we let's be straight and forward about that. I think that is what we so desperately need. What are your thoughts in that regard, Ron? Do you feel that where there's a lot of activism and there's a lot of activists that can go be wild-eyed and bushy-tailed and so forth, but they don't have the staying power if they don't have the Lord also leading them, and there's something with the reality of God within their hearts, just continuing to stir them and motivate them. Give your thoughts to that, if you would, please.
Well, first of all, the days of rallying and protesting need to be over for us. The time of organizing and being relational with the people that are in your own household, your neighbors, those in your community, those at the place you work and the place you worship. That is how we change America. It's always the way that America has changed. It has been always and will be the bottom up. I mean, it started with 12 disciples who came from all walks of life. It didn't start with the leaders of the church in those days, if you will, and it isn't this time. I think that the church, I think God allowed through this process today's Corinthian church to be exposed. I think they had become a bunch of buildings rather than being people of faith. And I think that the leadership is coming out of living rooms of people and out of new people that have been awakened again, a new awakening, I believe, in America. It starts with God. It starts with what's important and what isn't. It starts with understanding and knowing your place. And that's the problem that we've had is we're still all people. Nothing is new under the sun, Bill. Everything that we have experienced, people have never changed. And if you go down, it's the reason that the Bible is always current, because the people of those days are exactly as the people of today, because we were all created exactly the same then as we're created now. And we're a fallen world. That's where we live. And so carnal nature, sin is a part of who we are, and it will be until till the coming of Christ. But until that day, the question is, what is your calling? What is your place in this walk while you're here on this earth? Because this is temporary. Everything we're going through is temporary. The question is, will we enjoy the journey? Will we establish and create a place that will allow your children and grandchildren to experience the opportunity that we have? Understand that most of the rest of the world it's past that time. They don't have the opportunity that we have. People here believe it's the same in Europe or in Germany or France. It's not. They can't own a business. They can't, the churches are not operated. They're not free in their faith. Free speech does not exist in those countries, and it never has in Canada, by the way. All of the things that we have seen that have happened have already been tested. We've proven to fail. The people will not rise up. They will conform and consent as the people of Poland and that did during the days of Germany. We will see them play the music louder so we don't hear the trains. If you remember the story in Germany as they were headed there, you'd see, how could this have happened? That's where we are today. How could this have happened? And now we have been given a reprieve. I believe God did spare President Trump's life. I believe he is a different man than he used to be. We have to pray that he continues to stay true to that, and that he continues to surround himself with people who are of faith and who are looking long term and not looking for a position of status, and are not looking for a position of authority or financial gain, but are looking to preserve and protect the founding. And what I would challenge all of you for today is knowing that next year, the year 2026, is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And we have to question today, what will we be celebrating next year? Will we be celebrating the 250 years of our founding and the warnings that we were given? Because that Constitution, that Declaration of Independence, that preamble was stating that our country was built on godly principles and a foundation that is principled in faith. We need to embrace that, and we need to be beholden to that. We need to have confidence in that moving forward. The pillars are strong. It is not on sifting sand. It is built on something. The foundation is strong. It is us that have crumbled. It is our faith. It is our message that has not continued on. And that is still, the Constitution hasn't changed. We have never been a nation of laws and never will be. We are a nation of will and always will be. We need to have the will to carry out the laws, to uphold the laws, to preserve the freedoms and liberty granted to us, again, not by man, not by government, but by our Creator. Those unalienable rights, as they talked about it, that liberty. Liberty has nothing to do with freedom. Liberty is the freedom that God gives us to choose. It is the free will that he gave us to choose him and his following, but it also gave us that in our own individual rights. And we need to basically embrace that again. We need to share that with the people in the church, the young people that are growing up. We have an opportunity. Gen Z, for the first time, is tipping back again towards a conservative nature. And I believe our next group of leaders are going to come out of the faith-based community. We need to support them. We need to identify them. We need to train them. We need to recruit them. And we need to retain the good ones, and we need to replace those that are that have been elected and are not serving as they were elected. I believe that the best of America is still yet to come. It's a kind of the words that I also used to hear from the great Rush Limbaugh. No matter what we were facing in the second election of Bill Clinton or Obama, when we thought that it was all despair, we can't wait to listen to what Rush has to say today. And he got on and would laugh. And he would say, America hasn't changed. Our leadership, our God, our Constitution hasn't changed. Why are you of despair? Why are you not rising up? The inspiration for the future is what people are looking for, Bill. And I believe that God is putting that fire back in our belly. He's putting it back into the people. But we need you to be willing to spread the word first, and then to be willing to serve in some form of leadership based on your own personal calling.
Wow, Ron, that was so powerful. And I'm going to spread this as far and wide as I can, and I want to put it back in your hands, and you do what you can too. I'm sure you've spoken this in other arenas often, but it's very special and so much needed. And I hope we can continue. I want to talk about the more of the what we can do locally, which you have shared with us in the Wago recently. And I want to know more about that and be able to spread that word if at all possible. And if you would, Ron, if you would give the best contact information for you, also include how people can watch the Present Danger China webinars every week, and then if you would close us in prayer, if you would please.
I will. So you can go to several of the places in order to see. Obviously, you can go to presentdangerchina.com, I think .org both. You will be able to see they have done many, almost weekly. They are doing great webinars, if you will, with experts on the various efforts and things that are happening each and every day. You can go there. You can go to sovereigntycoalition.org in order to follow along and see the summits that are happening there on medical freedom and on the areas that's very important for you and even for the doctors and the people around you. And you can go to standupmichigan.com. You can sign up to get on our email list. But if you wish to reach out to me to have me speak to your group or something like that, you can email me directly at ron@standupmichigan.com, ron@standupmichigan.com. And I'd be glad to come back, because when I talk about organizing and relationally organizing in our own communities or wherever you live, this is the same here as it is everywhere. And I would really look back forward to coming back and spending an hour discussing how that starts and what we need to do. There are great tools that are available to us on the conservative side that have never been available before. And I think it will make it easier for you than you could imagine to begin to organize. This is the time to do it, not during an election time. This is not about voting. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about organizing like-minded people moving forward. So I will just close in prayer then, if you will. Dear Heavenly Father, sometimes we don't have the words and we don't know what questions to ask, but you know what is happening. I believe that you spared President Trump. I believe it was a miracle that was shown to the world. You could not pierce an ear and not kill somebody or whatever. And if it hadn't hit his ear, legacy media would destroy the whole narrative. We know that. I believe that he answered the call, and that from the time that he stood up and said, fight, 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 I believe that he is and was and became a different man. I believe that his mission is also changed. I believe the people that rallied around him have changed. The people serving today are literally serving. They're not looking for financial gain. They're not looking for to stay in Washington or the swamp for decades to come. They are looking to preserve and to protect America. This is not about our country. It is about what it stands for. It is about the foundation. And I believe that the only reason America still stands to this day is because of the foundational principles, the godly principles that our country was founded on, and do remain. It has attempted to been destroyed through bills and laws to tear it all down. It has been attempted to circumvent it by allowing global groups and national groups to be able to control its people, its movement. And we pray that both the Sovereignty Coalition and the medical freedom and our ability to travel, we pray that you would strike down the World Economic Forums and the people that are looking again to infiltrate our government and our individual lives, our business. I pray that you'd be with each and every person who listens to this podcast, and that you would help identify for them, first of all, the importance for them to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, knowing that there is no other way out of this world and for eternity than through him. We pray, and through you, and we just pray that you would, first of all, reach everyone there. We pray for an awakening that would happen with the young people, first in their own personal walk, and then with their service. We pray that we do meet everyone where they are, understanding they're not going to understand things as we do, and to accept them as Jesus did, wherever they are and wherever their walk is, and then lead through example and by example. And we pray that we would identify the calling of each and every one of us. It may be in your own church, in your own family, in your own community. It may not be to serve in an elected position, but more in a service of position through some committee or organization. But there is a place for each of us to serve and to be a part of and to be the leaders of, so that we can be the leaders in our own community and provide the solutions, because we literally can, by one community, and as I say, one household, one community, one neighborhood, one city, one county, one state, and one nation under God, we can change the trajectory of our country and for our children and grandchildren in the future. And we just pray that we'd continue to answer the call, that we would lead, and that we would answer whatever it is that you'd have us to do. And we know that there is a purpose not only for Trump and for this purpose but for America. And we pray that this 200 year anniversary would not be about a great reset as the world sees it or as Satan sees it, but that it would be a returning and a restoration of the foundation of our country and its founding, which is based on you and you alone. And we thank you for all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.